Howie Rich is the chairman of the organization U.S. Term Limits, which works to establish and defend term limits at all levels of government. And he has some very powerful ideas about term limits and a convention. Howie Rich, you are the leader of the leading organization arguing for term limits reform. You argued an important case before the Supreme Court, and you are in favor of an Article 5 convention to achieve term limits. Tell us why.
Okay, initially what we did is we had a strategy in which voters could vote for a term limits amendment to their own state constitution. We got 23 states to do it, tough campaigns and all the rest of it. And a U.S. Supreme Court case, our case, U.S. Term Limits versus Thornton, we lost that case 5-4 in the U.S. Supreme Court in 1995. Our new strategy is utilizing Article 5, the second method, for a convention. Term limits, in my view, would be very helpful in terms of the democratic process. We have term limits on 15 state legislatures. And what we've seen is more women, competitive elections, money is more equalized. This is stuff that you, Larry, you're interested in accomplishing. Congress is just, it's unbelievable. Ballotpedia did a study on how many competitive elections were there in 2016. There were 435 House seats. 23 were competitive. That means 6% of seats were competitive. The incumbent wins all the rest of them. Come 2018, where we had a wave election, 82 seats were considered competitive by Ballotpedia. 20%. What about the others? In 40 districts, nobody challenges the incumbent. So what you get is a political class and a seniority system. So we're utilizing this Article 5 route, the second method that George Mason suggested. The main reason that I favor term limits, and the term limit I favor is a real term limit, 3 House terms, 6 years, and 2 Senate terms, is what we call adverse preselection. There are a lot of people in this room who I think would qualify for Congress. And if you think about it, you say, oh, somebody asked me to run for Congress. Great. Let me take a look at it. The re-election rate in the U.S. House of Representatives is 95%. So if you are foolish enough to run for Congress against an incumbent, not much of a chance. But in this particular district, we have a chance because the incumbent was indicted, or it's an open seat. You know, he left, he retired, okay, for whatever reason. Great, I think I'll run. But when you think about it some more, let's suppose I'm a doctor, I'm an accountant, I'm an engineer, I'm a business person, I'm an educator. If I win, I win, they go through all this scrutiny, and now I win. And now I have a chance to I'm going to get in Congress. How does it work? Well, there's a seniority system. It's a top-down system. I'm a successful, engineer or whatever I'm in life. I'm going to be subservient to seniority. The average committee chair has been in Congress for 23 years. So if I'm going to run, I'm not saying me, but a successful person in life wants to run, why would I run? I'm going to be subservient. It's going to take me a decade or 2 decades to get anything accomplished. Why would I do that? We call this adverse preselection because the best people, on average, don't run. But then there's this idea of term limits on Congress. And if you had 3 House terms, the seniority system is out the window, It's now based on merit. You're going to attract more people. You're going to have competitive elections. Money will be equalized. You know, money works like this, Larry, you understand this. It's something like the incumbent raises and spends $1.5 million, the challenger $250,000. So it's a 6-to-1 advantage to the incumbent. And of course, the incumbent has all the name ID to start with. Special interest PACs, $9 to $1. So it's a rigged system. But in open seats, where you don't have this, disparity between a challenger and an incumbent, the average is $600,000. So what term limits does, real term limits, it equalizes the system. And the Article 5 approach, to me, I agree with Larry, it's the only way to do it. You're going to get 2/3 of both houses of Congress to term limit themselves without enormous pressure. Give me a break.
Thank you very much for that. What I'm hearing in this very rich discussion, friends, is a powerful concern that our current institutions, Congress, the courts, and the presidency, as well as the media, are not representing the considered and thoughtful and deliberate will of we the people. And that was really what the framers hoped would be reflected in the constitutional amendment process and filtered through representative democracy. Howie, what would James Madison think about term limits?
I think he'd be in favor. Jefferson called term limits mandatory rotation in office. And here's a tidbit I learned today, and I've been involved in term all these years. There's no term limit on me. What I learned today is Ben Franklin, right here in Pennsylvania, in the first Pennsylvania Constitution, inserted a 4-year term limit on the Pennsylvania legislature. Now, there have been 5 constitutions altogether. They managed to get it out, but Ben Franklin favored term limits.
Fascinating, amazing. I think, in fact, Larry, since this is your book in the beginning of what I know is going to be a very galvanizing tour, you should have the last word. So why don't you send our audience out into the fall evening with whatever words you want to give them about why it's urgently important to reform America so that we have a more representative system.
Well, the striking thing I was excited about to be on this panel is that there's obviously, we're all white men, but there's another kind of diversity that is on this panel of political diversity. And I think what you can hear out of this conversation is that though we have differences on substance, I think we've all come to a place where we see we need to have a really serious conversation about democratic form. And so I'd love to see an Article 5 convention that talks about term limits. I'd like to see that as part of a conversation about representational integrity. I think part of what you're saying is that we don't have a system for representing which is actually has an integrity with our populace because the insiders protect themselves from that. And I certainly agree that we need to think about the structure of the Supreme Court. There's so many other constitutional courts around the world that have begun to do it better than us. And for very simple reasons, we could imagine fixing our court in that way. But I think the most important lesson that comes from this is to resist a kind of elitism about the Constitution. And by that I mean, so I'm not going to name this, but you might be able to figure this out. I was having a conversation with a very senior liberal leader who's opposed to Article 5 convention. And I was pitching him about why some of his arguments were completely bogus, and anyway, this was a good thing that we should have. And he said, okay, you've kind of convinced me, but this conversation happened in October 2016. He said, why should we risk it? We're going to have an election. Hillary Clinton's going to be elected. She's going to pick 3 Supreme Court justices, and we'll get what we want through a reinterpretation by the Supreme Court. And it was like a punch in the gut, because I thought, this is what constitutionalism has become. It's above the people. It's like we should not involve the people, keep the people far from the Constitution, because we can't trust you guys. Like we have to have the lawyers, the elite, who are figuring out what the Constitution should mean. And if there's any problems, then we'll just get another set of justices on the Supreme Court who will fix it for us. That is the death of democracy. When we no longer feel entitled and empowered and capable of even understanding our Constitution and doing something with it, then we don't deserve a Constitution. So you obviously, this congregation lives in the celebration of the idea that people can understand and celebrate and teach the Constitution, and I'm a great admirer of my friend Jeff and what you are doing. Thank you for that. But you are not America. And
You are America. You're the best of America, is what you're saying.
I'm happy to say that, but what I'm saying is most of America does not feel entitled or empowered or even asked to understand their Constitution. And until we can change that, which really is about changing the attitude of a bunch of elite people who think that they should be close to controlling the Constitution and keep it far from you, we are not going to have any hope of fixing the core problems that are at the core of democracy.
For inspiring all of us to live up to the best of America, please join me in thanking our panelists.